Hi class, this is the continuation of chapter 13 lecture, and we're on slide 17, so I wanted to continue. Let's go into PowerPoint mode. So where we left off, we were talking about paper charts and the steps for filing medical documentation into them. And typically, you'll get patient information most of the time faxed to you, but also through the mail, right? So the first thing is inspecting a report or some kind of result to identify the patient. And you want to make sure to highlight the patient's name and their date of birth. And then indexing is to determine where you would find the chart. And you want to, when you're dealing with paper charts, is attach, whatever results you have about them, right? Attach it to the front of the chart, bring it to the doctor. The doctor will initial it. And with paper charts, they're really organized into sections, just how when you look at the EMR, we have all those different tabs to organize the material into like one section of notes, another section maybe of lab results, another section of radiology results, etc. So with your paper chart, once you have the doctor signed off on that document, right, you're going to put it into the chart in the right area or the right section. And here we have sorting the reports into their categories. And then, with your paper chart, I remember with Sleepy Hollow, you'd have to hole punch it and then put it into the right area and then file your chart away. And we used numeric charts because we had so many patients. So we had so many file cabinets all over the office to file these charts away. So that's a huge advantage with EMRs. We don't have to do any of this filing. Instead, there's lots and lots of scanning. So we will get lots of things faxed to us regarding our patients. We have to, give that information. It's usually some kind of result or maybe a consultation to the doctor who's going to initial off on it. And then we have to scan it to their chart, but in the right area of their chart. So that's kind of the difference between paper charts versus the EMR. Next up, they have more filing procedures regarding paper charts, and sometimes this cross-referencing, it's not that important, but just know sometimes I remember when dealing with paper charts, I couldn't find somebody's chart. We had temporarily misplaced it. So in that situation, when you're running out of time, right, and the patient's there in your office and they need to be seen, just create a dummy chart and indicate on there that this is a temporary chart, and don't tell the patient that you can't find their chart because that'll make them upset. You'll eventually find it, probably later on that day or the following day. But you just want to create some kind of temporary chart for the doctor to document on for the visit. So that's kind of how you deal if you accidentally misplace a chart. And they have here too tickler files, and it's basically a reminder, right, to follow up with a required action. So for me at work, I have this to-do folder. So throughout the day, I collect lots of Post-its, lots of notes, and if I don't have enough time to finish my tasks, I just put them into my to-do folder, and I make sure to look at it the next day to try to get them done at the beginning of the day so that I'm on top of my work. So that's kind of a tickler file. It's just kind of like a Post-it to remind yourself to do something. We also have here some other filing procedures. So they start off talking about common documents found in patient charts. So I told you a little bit, right? So you're going to have usually you have progress notes at the top, then laboratory results, and then radiology results. After that, you would have authorizations in their chart. You'll have their intake forms. You'll have copies of their driver's license and insurance card. uh, patient portal communication, lots of different things like that. And even correspondence, right, from maybe their insurance company to the doctor. And in terms of an out guide, so this is really good if you're dealing with a paper chart system. If you have to pull a chart, let's say you got to fax in some kind of lab result for a patient, right? You put the lab result on the chart, you put in the doctor's office for him to initial off on it. You would then want to put an out guide where that chart is supposed to be in the filing cabinet and indicate on there, okay, this chart is on the doctor's desk. So just in case that patient comes in that day for an appointment, you're not running around the office trying to find their chart. You know, you look for it in the filing cabinet and then the out guide tells you, oh, it's on the doctor's desk. So then you can easily go get it and get it prepped for the patient's visit. So that's an out guide. And then when it comes to record purging, what they're talking about here is deactivating or inactivating a patient's chart because they no longer come to your practice or they have passed away. So if a patient passes away, you would want to document that on both a paper chart and also in your EMR. You can do it in both places. And with HIPAA law, we are required to hold onto a patient's chart for 7 years. And then after that time, we can shred their chart if they no longer are coming to us. So it's a little bit about record purging. Now, steps to locating a missing file. This is one thing I do not miss about paper charts. It was so annoying because I remember on the weekends I'd be the only medical assistant there. Patient came in, I can't find their chart. You don't want to tell the patient this. You know it's somewhere in the office, but you don't know where because nobody used an out guide. And so basically, in this situation, just think, okay, where are the different places it could be? So in our old office, it would either be on the doctor's desk, in their inbox as well as outbox. You would want to check. It would be on your manager's desk, possibly. It could also be on the biller's desk. And last but not least, it could be maybe we're waiting for lab results, so it could have been in the laboratory folder. So those were the different places that it could be. So I would just run around those different places until I found it. So that's kind of the system you want to use to finding a paper chart. But just remember, always use that out guide. So you're not running around trying to find a missing file. Now, in terms of the disadvantages of paper charts, so a paper chart can only be viewed by one person at a time. With an EMR, I can be viewing a patient's chart at the same time that my doctor is, if we're both doing tasks for that patient, which is really nice. It makes us more efficient. Another thing is that paper charts can be lost or misplaced. With medical records or an EMR, you can't really lose somebody's chart. In terms of equipment and storage space required, so with paper charts, we had so many filing cabinets to store all of our paper charts. It was amazing, and they take up so much space. So when you switch to an EMR, you free up all this space because everything's electronic and on your computer. So that was a big disadvantage of having paper charts, is all of the storage that it takes to maintain them. And in terms of error, I think both are susceptible to error. And just know if you make a mistake, we're human, that's okay. Just make sure to go back and correct it. We can always correct our mistakes. With electronic medical records, we started doing this, right, with the 2009 Act. And now pretty much I would say, there's a transition period, but now I would say most medical practices use EMRs. And EMRs, everything is on your computer. The one downside there's some downsides to EMRs too, like paper charts. But with EMR, sometimes you'll lose your internet connection at work, and your computer will it would have crashed temporarily. So when that happens, you have to go back to using a paper chart. So we have, paper that we just would take out and record everything on paper for that patient's visit. And then when the internet comes back on, you have to go back and retrospectively document the patient's visit in their EMR. So that's one downside. But just like paper charts, an EMR medical record is fully recognized as a legal document. And we have here, so with EMRs, so you free up a lot of space. The only thing is switching to computers is really expensive. So it's kind of a downside. And you always have to back up your system. So your IT department will do that so you don't lose any charts. And just know, within your EMR, you can fax things to other doctors as needed if you're in that patient's care team, which is nice. And we always need to make sure that we abide by HIPAA and protect patients' privacy and confidentiality. So here's some disadvantages of EMRs, right? They need protection to prevent loss of data. They're expensive. Computers are expensive to maintain. They may require on-site assistance from your IT department. And the staff have to get trained on how to use them so that they do their job well. So those are some of the disadvantages. Another one is when you lose internet. You have to switch back to paper and then go back and document. That's another downside. So here, last but not least, there's a couple terms. So they have EHR defined versus EMR. So an EHR is a patient's entire health record from every doctor they've ever seen, right? So it's kind of their universal medical record. And EMR is just from like one doctor or one medical group, okay? So that's sort of the difference between those two terms. And that is it for the lecture. I just wanted to show you too my Hoag forms at work, right? So here's the adult patient forms. And I just wanted to show you the notice of privacy, or the receipt of notice of privacy practices. Here it is. So this is that HIPAA form. So you got to make sure to have the patient sign it, that you've given them the notice of privacy practices, how their health information can be shared. And then this is the handout you give them. So they keep this. This is the notice of privacy practices. Okay, so you have this and then the forms on top for them to fill out as new patients. And then you can see too, for if you need to get a patient's records from another doctor, you can see up here, they're called incoming records because they're coming into you. And you would write down the patient's name, date of birth. And usually here, I just get the doctor's name and kind of like the city and state where they work out of. And then for attention, I would put medical records. And then I would just usually try to Google the fax number, and you fax it over. And you'll put down here which one of your doctors is requesting their medical record. And you want to check off your site location. And you want to be very specific here. What does your doctor want to be released to us? Okay? I want to be very specific as well as in terms of the time. And then here you would fill it out. Usually it's for continuing care. And then just have the patient initial, date, sign, date here, check no. They usually don't want a receipt. Okay, so the forms are identical. The only thing is, this one you're asking for incoming records. This one you're asking for outgoing records. Okay, so they're pretty much the same, but a little variation. because of that. So thank you so much for listening. This is the end of the lecture. Thank you. Have a great night.